Welcome back to the HR Exchange podcast, everyone. My name is David Rice. I'm the editor of the HR Exchange Network. I'm not the HR Exchange Network itself, but I'm the editor, and as always, your host for the podcast. And I'm joined today by LaDavia Drane. She is the global head of inclusion, diversity, and equity at Amazon Web Services. Welcome, LaDavia.
Thank you, David. It's good to be here.
So notice in your title there, inclusion and diversity are a little differently ordered. I just want to start the conversation. Kind of tell me a little bit about the intention of that.
Absolutely. We put inclusion first here at Amazon Web Services because, I mean, you know this just as well as I do, David. We can focus on diversity, which a lot of times means hiring and making sure that we have a diverse population, both visible and invisible diversity. But it's so important to make sure that we have the ground set and that inclusion is felt, it's heard, it's seen by our employees. We want to make sure that when folks come, when they join us, that they stay. And having an inclusive workplace is what we found makes all the difference in the world. So that's why we lead with inclusion. And it doesn't mean that equity is the least important. It is something that I think that most organizations have started to intentionally make a part of their body of work. We have also done that here in AWS. So all very much important, but having that inclusion, having that inclusive workplace where people feel as though they belong and that their value is number one, most important for us here in AWS.
Excellent. Yeah, I know, and I couldn't agree more. Like, I've talked to a few people now who's like, if you don't have the inclusion piece, the rest you're not gonna get where you want to go. So I thought that was interesting. But the real reason I'm talking to you today is I know that there's some new research out about around women in AI. And in AI related positions within the workforce. And we know that women have been underrepresented in STEM fields, for quite some time, but only 26% of data and AI positions are held by women. That number seems kind of startlingly low, given the percentage of women in the workforce and women receiving STEM degrees right now. So can you help paint a picture for us around why this situation has developed the way that it has, and what some of the barriers have been for entry into these fields for women?
Sure. I think that historically, women now have, of course, more access to education. But historically, we know this. I remember being a child myself, and so being drawn to things other than math and science. Usually, girls are usually drawn to like linguistics and just other types of subjects. And so I think that it starts at a really early age, which is why we decided to work specifically with girls in tech to kind of disrupt that gap. But it's something that's just a prevailing thing that happens in our society. And so I think that it's also, if you look at kind of 2020 and what's happened in 2020 with the COVID-19 challenges and more mothers needing to be home and, just over rotating on their parental duties. We're seeing that 1 in 4 women are considering downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce completely. And so, of course, that also has an impact now on our STEM population that's already small. So I think there's societal issues, but then also just, are the times that we're living in right now, where we'll see, if we aren't intentional, we'll see that number continue to get smaller. So we're working to be very intentional here in AWS in helping to make that gap smaller.
It seems almost counterintuitive to allow this to happen, given what we know about the effectiveness of diverse workforces. But I would say it's quite a big mistake and something that has the potential to handicap organizational effectiveness around AI implementations. Would you agree with that statement? And what are some of the things that you're hoping to see at AWS to help grow the role women are playing in these types of positions?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that just the way that I think about this is we have to make sure that we increase representation. right? And so representation, and that's in the STEM field, that's in fields like AI, but making sure that we're focusing on hiring, promotion, and retention. And I do think that that'll have a positive impact kind of on our organizational effectiveness. Um, and other than that, here in AWS in particular, we're focusing a lot on sponsorship programs, focusing a lot on opening educational opportunities for women. We talked a little bit about an inclusive workplace. We know that an inclusive workplace is completely necessary in order to make sure that women feel like they belong in these spaces. And so we're doing a lot of intentional work in that way as well. Um, Other things that I say is, here in AWS in particular, I think that something that stands out is that we truly believe that good intentions are just not enough. We need mechanisms to really get things done and to get to ground truth about what's causing issues, right, with women in particular, in this case, not necessarily staying in STEM fields or not entering STEM fields at all. And so it's really important to us that we set up mechanisms so that we can track our progress, so that we can very quickly know if what we're doing works. And if it doesn't, we can pivot and try other things. So important, really important to do that with respect to women generally, but specifically women in tech and in STEM fields like AI.
Yeah, I mean, with AI, it seems to me, it's a particularly important one for women to be involved in order for AI itself to succeed. I mean, there's a fair amount of unintentional bias involved in AI that different perspectives can help alleviate. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that this lack of diversity around AI has on the product itself and the ability of what it can help us do?
David, I think I'll leave the specifics of bias and AI to our technologists. I'm not a technologist, but what I can say is that AI, it's rapidly growing. It's a rapid growing part of the technology industry, and it permeates lots of other types of tech. And as such, it's critical that we have a diverse set of technologies working on it. Hard stop. I do believe that. And so hopefully that's a helpful answer to your question. But we got to get some technologists here to really talk about, what that looks like from their view, from their point of view.
Uh, Not all AI positions are about, coding or understanding data science. It as the report that you guys were involved in notes, a lot of it comes down to understanding a problem that needs fixing, and that goes back to this diversity of thought concept. Experiences. People just have different ways of looking at a problem. Is there an example that sticks out to you where you've experienced this or you've seen this play out, where maybe somebody who wasn't the most qualified to do something actually had the answer?
Sure, sure. I'll actually turn it on its head a little bit because I think that there is one person in particular that I've worked really closely with back when I was in public policy and even now doing ID&E work for AWS, and her name is Dr. Nashley Cephas, PhD, scientist, just really, really incredibly successful in this area. And I remember us thinking through, where we stand around diversity in technology and making sure that there's scientists that come from different backgrounds and have diverse thought. And the way that she was able to see this from so many different vantage points. But in particular, she's a scientist who was also able to bring just her background, right, of being a Black woman in the US from the South. And so they're just perspectives that she had uh, that were based on science, but also based on her lived experience. That, I mean, clearly having someone like that on a team when you're developing products makes all the difference in the world. So that's just one example and one person that I point to. And there's so many other examples, but hopefully that one's helpful.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier, I mean, you mentioned sponsorship, and I come back to this idea of a mentor all the time. I think it's something that's important in all fields. I've had mine down the years that have played an important part in my own career. And, I'm not in anything technological. I'm not breaking any barriers in here. So, it sounds like maybe at times it's been somewhat difficult for females in tech to find female mentors, predecessors, that have kind of blazed that trail, um, to kind of learn from. And do you see this as starting to change now, though?
Yeah, it's hard to be what you can't see, right?
Yeah.
And so you're right. If there aren't enough women who are already doing the work, then it is difficult, right, to find those sponsors and mentors. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more important than having a sponsor. And that sponsor doesn't necessarily have to be another woman in tech or a technologist, but just someone who's invested in their future. It's going to make sure that they unblock and unlock things so that that woman can be successful, can thrive, and can feel valued in this space. And so, so important. I talked a bit about girls in tech, so I'll just go back to that partnership. So we are providing what I hope will be for a large number of girls in tech that are connected to the Girls in Tech program. We'll be providing those technologists to be able to partner and to provide that mentorship. I'm really excited about this project. It really is, it's a passion for me to make sure that that we are really intentional about providing that mentorship and sponsorship even now for girls that are very young and may or may not go into STEM, but at least they'll be able to see what they one day could be.
Excellent. So as I kind of wrap this up, I just want to focus on the future a little bit and talk about, what comes next. So how do we change the culture around these fields to eliminate some of these issues and around gender discrimination, obviously, and the hurdles that women face in finding success in AI or other tech-related fields? What's the next step?
Yeah, I think that inspiring young women to pursue their STEM passions and providing them with the proper tools, education, and resources to do so is so incredibly important. It's important to make sure that we increase the representation of women in technology, to be really specific. Um, and it's also about fostering an inclusive culture at tech companies, an inclusive culture that makes working there seem appealing to women job seekers, followed by creating opportunities for mentorship growth and an opportunity for women once they are there. These types of changes won't happen overnight, but it's encouraging to see so many companies, AWS included, taking meaningful action to increase the representation and retention of women in our workforces.
Excellent. Well, LaDavia, I want to thank you for joining me today. This was good.
Well, thank you so much for having me, David. Such an important topic. So thanks for bringing this conversation to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, if you want to read the full report, look up Women in AI from Deloitte. It's a report that's come out just in the last few weeks. Yeah, I gave it a read, and it was very educational and interesting. So check that out. Uh, until next time, stay safe, everybody.